Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to welcome you all to this web panel. Today we are going to talk about the genocide in Srebrenica 25 years ago and the connection between genocide denial and Islamophobia. The Srebrenica genocide took place, as I said, 25 years ago, and more than 8,000 Muslims, Muslim men, were massacred by the Serbian forces in Bosnia at that time. And unfortunately, this also happened they were under the protection of the UN forces in Srebrenica. It was declared as a safe zone, but however, this took place. Of course, beyond that, also many massacres took place also against Muslims in Bosnia. Today, unfortunately, after 25 years, we are seeing a wave of statements from elites, politicians, that they are denying that this has happened. And this was the biggest massacre or genocide, that took place after the Holocaust in Europe, after the Second World War. And the motto was never again. However, it did happen again. And the problem today is that some circles are trying to eradicate the memory of this genocide. And today we are going to discuss this issue. We have distinguished speakers with us. We have one keynote speaker, Abdullah Eren. He is the president for Turks abroad and related committees in Turkey. We have Amil Khan from the Remembering Srebrenica UK NGO. We have Farid Hafez from Georgetown University, the Bridge Initiative. And we have Ivan Ejub Kostic, author of the European Islamophobia report, Serbia country report he has authored. And tonight we're gonna discuss this important issue. And today is the anniversary of the 25th anniversary of the Srebrenica massacre. So today is an important day. So let me start with Abdullah Eren. I would like to give the floor to him to deliver his keynote speech, and then we will continue with the discussion with the panelists. The floor is yours, Abdullah.
Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator, my dear friend Enes Bayraklı, and hello to everyone. I would like to thank the organizers of this event, and I would like to express my deepest gratitude for the privilege of addressing here during the 25th anniversary of the Srebrenica genocide. Today, I would like to speak out on what happened back then in 1995 and how the world has failed to remember our sisters and brothers, mothers and fathers who lost their lives in those dark days. We believe that discussing this issue is crucial, particularly on the day we mourn for our losses while all the others sacralize the evils in genocide. Understanding why Srebrenica matters and what we can do for standing up against hatred and Islamophobia is the only way to keep alive the harrowing memories and take lessons from it. The attacks on Bosnia started on the 1st April 1991, and this marked the Serbian persecution in Bosnia, which lasted for 3.5 years. When everything was over, 1 million people were forced to migrate within the country. 200,000 Bosnians were massacred, 12,500 Bosnians disappeared, more than 500,000 Bosnia-Herzegovina citizens were left homeless, and unfortunately 50,000 women were systematically raped, and half of the 5,000 artifacts from the Ottoman period were destroyed. July 1995 witnessed the scariest moments of the Bosnian brutality in the Serbian autonomous region established in Bosnia-Herzegovina with support from Serbia and lasted for a week. Srebrenica was one of the 6 UN safe zones declared in Bosnia in 1993, as you said, and was intended to be protected by the Dutch Peace Corps. The United Nations took on the obligations it didn't fulfill and left its safe areas to its fate. Srebrenica, isolated, was swollen with the refugees from the neighborhood. Starving, disease, malnutrition, pneumonia, tuberculosis were looming around. While Srebrenica was in this situation, on the orders of the Republic Srpska President Radovan Karadzic, Serbian General Ratko Mladic moved down Srebrenica in the morning of July 6. The justification was retaliation for the infiltration of Muslim forces in the city into Serbian territory. Of course, there was no such thing. On July 7th, Bosnia Serbs attacked one of the Dutch military observation points in Srebrenica, and they took hostages some of the Dutch soldiers, and the international community made no preventive attempts, using the hostages as an excuse, and Srebrenica would be sacrificed. On July 11, Ratko Mladic entered the city and said to the cameras, and it is all recorded, he said, "It is time to take revenge on the Turks," adding that he gifted the city to the Serbs. Civil massacres took place within a week, July 11 to 16, and 8,372 Muslim Bosniak men under the age of 75 and over 12 were killed. More than 25,000 women, children, and the elderly were forcibly removed from the area. And I should say here, by opening brackets, the world rewarded the Serbs with the 49% of the country lands where they cleared from the Muslims through genocide. This is Republika Srpska, a Serbian entity within Bosnia. By July 17, all mass graves were closed, the victims were buried, removed from the graves, and buried again. Evidence were destroyed. Denial of genocide began simultaneously with the genocide itself. The International Criminal Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia recognized the one-week massacre as a genocide in August 2009, but no country has been charged as the perpetrator of the genocide. It was in international community's interest to see what happened in Srebrenica and in Bosnia in general as a civil war, because the genocide was made under the United Nations flag. In fact, this violence was not a function of chaos or ancient hatreds. It was the carefully choreographed result of a political decision made by the Bosnian Serb leadership with the support of the Serbian government. These are the facts, of course, we all know. What we don't know about the Srebrenica genocide is the denial activities of the 1995 genocide offenders, which were carried out insidiously by using huge funds, great efforts, and international supports, despite the international courts admitted that the events in Srebrenica in 1995 were a genocide and judged and sentenced the primary genociders like Milosevic, Karadzic, and Mladic. The Srebrenica Memorial Center, which was established in 2000 in Srebrenica, Potocari, in order to uncover the facts about the Srebrenica genocide, published a report last May, Srebrenica Genocide Denial Report. In cooperation with the center, YTB, Presidency for Turks Abroad and Related Communities, has translated the report into Turkish, and we distributed it to the research centers and related formal government structures in order to inform them about the denial attempts of the perpetrators of Srebrenica genocide. The Srebrenica Denial Report identifies main talking points and tactics as the most frequently used in the denial of Srebrenica genocide. Disputing the number and identities of Srebrenica genocide's victim is the main talking point of deniers. Those who deny the Srebrenica genocides open the number and identities of Srebrenica victims up for the discussion and reject the number of the victims accepted by the respected judicial authorities, claiming that this number is at most 2,000. The second tactic to cover up the genocide is portraying Serbs as the oppressed and victim people of history. According to this approach, an anti-Serb campaign is being carried out all over the world, and conspiracies are constantly being produced in order to denigrate, demonize, and display them as murderers. This international anti-Serb conspiracy is used to undermine the international courts. The legitimacy of the courts is questioned, and anti-Serb bias in the institutions are pointed out as an excuse for denial. The third one is the one which we all know best: historically revised narratives which glorify war criminals and bolster Serbian nationalism. The normalization of aggressive Serbian nationalism, alternative history course, curriculums at schools, and public canonization of war criminals have been the case to silence the past and narrate a made-up story. In 2018 and 19, denial activities were carried out intensely and began to bear fruit, unfortunately. Two commissions established at the official level in 2019 in the Republika Srpska in order to deny what happened in Bosnia and Srebrenica. These two commissions mean we do not recognize the findings and decisions of the international organizations, courts, and researchers about the historical facts in the region. The whole world is the enemy of Serbs, and the facts are distorted. We will find our own truth, that is, we will construct it. So, by distorting the truth, we will rewrite the history. The developments within the municipality of Srebrenica in the last 2 years reminds Muslim residents of Srebrenica the events before the Bosnian War, unfortunately, declaring the war criminal Radovan Karadzic as a hero. Serbian mayor of the city uses the rhetoric that exalts the fascist Chetnik movement at every opportunity. The posters of Radovan Mladic and Karadzic, who are responsible for the genocide, are exhibited in various parts of the city within the inscription, "No genocide has occurred." Serbian convoys are throwing pig organs to the memorial center by singing Chetnik anthems around the Srebrenica Memorial Center on the eve of Orthodox Christmas and firing the gun into the air. As stated in the report, these are not just ordinary harassment, but symbols with Islamophobic intentions. Deniers are not limited to the people in these cases. The 2019 Nobel Prize for Literature winner, Austrian writer Peter Handke, has also been identified as one of the deniers of Srebrenica. You also put him on the cover of your very important work on the Islamophobia report 2019. Handke, not an ordinary literary writer, but a close friend of Serbian President Slobodan Milosevic, a war criminal, wrote that depicting Serbs as aggressors of the conflict is unfair, and this is so funny. Markele marketplace was bombed not by Serbs, but by Muslims. Handke is a genocide denier who testifies in favor of Milosevic in The Hague and laments him when he died of a heart attack. Giving the Nobel Prize to Handke is stated as nothing but an affirmation of the Srebrenica genocide in the upper layers of Western intellectual class. In recent years, many publications in Serbia and the Republika Srpska and the international arena to deny the Srebrenica genocides have been drawn attention. So much so that even the war criminals who are the perpetrators of genocide write books or articles on the subject. As the denial report correctly stated that the denial of Srebrenica genocide is related to the ideological discourses and extreme right-wing tendencies which triggered anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, and xenophobia. Recollecting this event will show us the connections between the denial and Islamophobia. 51 Muslims who were worshipping in Christchurch, New Zealand, were killed by a 25-year-old attacker who believed in the superiority of the white race. The names of the Serbian nationalists were written on the weapon used by the attacker, and he listened to a Chetnik song that glorified Radovan Karadzic just before the attack. And also, you may remember very well, Norwegian far-right terrorist Breivik, who murdered 77 people in Oslo and Otaya Island, saying his actions are defense against Islam, which he claims is taking over Europe, is Srebrenica genocide perpetrators here. Like Breivik, genociders of Bosnia claimed that they saved the Christian West from Islam. We are all responsible, regardless of who we are, for fighting against the denial of genocide committed at the UN Safe Zone Srebrenica. The Srebrenica Genocide Denial Report tells us what we can do while fulfilling these duties and responsibilities. When we think about combating the denial, we might only think about denials at the institutional level. However, both collectively and individually, we all have responsibility to fight against the Srebrenica denial at different levels. We, as ordinary citizens, can express the facts with a determined, brave, and clear stance in all platforms we can reach, starting from our close circles, being aware of the discourses and claims used by the Srebrenica genocide deniers. The terms such as ethnic cleansing, massacre have been used as euphemism for the term genocide. It is very, very important to speak a lot and say genocide. At the government level, making anti-denial laws and informative publications through relevant official institutions and organizations can be the first step. In national and international platforms on genocides, human rights, hate crimes, xenophobia, and Islamophobia, truths related to the genocides and denial of Srebrenica can be brought to the agenda. Updating school curriculums and correct historical narratives are also important when we think that young generations are the key to correct the wrongdoings of the past and aim a better future. At the civil society level, organizing informative activities to support public activities, organizing programs where genocide survivors and genocide experts can convey their experiences of Srebrenica to the audience, and arranging joint activities with the Srebrenica Memorial Center can be effective. Today is the 25th anniversary of Srebrenica genocide, and unfortunately, we gathered online because of the pandemic. As I mentioned before, we all have responsibilities on different levels, and what we know is that the truth must be protected. Remembering Srebrenica and understanding the denial have real importance to see the current events in light of resurgent threat of Serbian nationalism against Muslims. By recognizing this fact and not forgetting that we are all responsible to combat the denial and Islamophobia, it will be possible to build a peaceful world and pledge to stand up to any kind of hatred, intolerance, and disrespect against Muslims. We must speak out with one voice when a genocide is denied and must not forget the genocide, because a forgotten genocide is repeated. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you very much, Abdullah. Thank you for your participation to this important panel. And I would like to thank you once again for your participation. And then I would like to continue with the panel. We will have our first speaker, Farid Hafez. As you know, we are publishing European Islamophobia report since 2015, and this year we published this year we published the 5th edition of this report. And on the cover page, also we used the ceremony of the Nobel Prize in Literature to Peter Handke, because we think this shows that how I mean, to which degree the Islamophobia is normalized today in Europe, especially because Peter Handke is well known for his denial of the genocide, but also his support to Milosevic, who was responsible for the genocide and the massacres in Bosnia, but also in Kosovo and also in other parts of the Yugoslavia, also in Croatia. So, Farid is the other editor of the European Islamophobia report, and we have been mentioning this denial of genocide in the last 2 or 3 years. This was coming from the authors of the Balkan countries, this development, and Farid is going to talk about the connection between Islamophobia and the genocide denial and the findings of our report. The floor is yours, Farid. We cannot hear you.
All right, you should hear me now? All
yes.
Right. Okay. Thank you, Enes, for having me here and for organizing this panel and dedicating it to this, I think, very important connection that we can see all around the world, actually, when it comes to the denial or the genocide in respect to a Muslim population, the Bosnian Muslims, 25 years ago, and what we see in the dissemination of anti-Muslim ideology around the world. Definitely, if we go back, and since the European Islamophobia Report 2019 is our point of departure here, there were a lot of events that took place on a global level, also on a European level, which we could mention here, right? There were terrorist attacks in Europe, like those in the German city of Hanau, but also the most, let's say, infamous one that really shook the global public and which was also shortly mentioned in Christchurch, New Zealand, where we all know terrorists stormed 2 mosques and shot 51 people dead. So let me just explain why for the cover of this year, we did not choose one of these terrorists or murderers who killed praying Muslims or politicians in Germany, but why we chose this picture showing Peter Handke being awarded the Nobel Prize in Literature. For us, this was a very striking example of the normalization of Islamophobia. Not within the circles of white supremacists, from whom we all know what they believe in and what they are doing, and it's very obvious, right? But we wanted to choose something discussing Islamophobia within the circles of power, not the circles of the fringe white supremacists. So in a way, I think it was indeed a scandal, as we have seen, because there were a lot of reactions. But still, it was also widely welcomed that Peter Handke was awarded the Nobel Prize in Literature. So let's just imagine that an author and an award-winning author receives a Nobel Prize in literature, and he's a Holocaust denier. I think all of us are clear about the fact that this would just not happen, right? Why? Because the Holocaust in our global consciousness is so much there, and it's a normative, has a normative dimension as to not really being questioned, right? Which is good. So I'm not calling for historical revisionism. But the point that I want to make is that the fact that somebody receives a Nobel Prize in literature, yet he is somebody who denies the genocide committed against Bosnian Muslims, that shows us where we are in terms of how much we really respect, or let's say rather not respect, what Bosnian Muslims have been going through. So the genocide is a symbol, because it was, at the end of the day, the largest human catastrophe on the European continent since the end of the Second World War, right? So after 1945, after the whole world was, and especially the political elite in Europe would say, never again, we saw that it happened again. And it was committed by white Europeans against white Europeans. But there was one fundamental marker which was the reason why to differentiate between the Bosniak peoples on one side and the rest, and that was the Muslimness. Hence, awarding somebody a Nobel Peace Prize, in literature, revealed how insensitive and ignorant important global institutions are to the suffering, not only of the Bosnian people, but also to a crime against humanity which was committed against Muslims. And I think this is really the symbol and the reason why we chose this for the cover of our annual European Islamophobia report, the 2019 edition. Because as we all know, it is well known that Peter Handke has a very long history of genocide denial. The author of our last year's report on Kosovo, Adem Ferizaj, also demonstrates this in his chapter on the European Islamophobia report, which you can find online and you can download for free. And he basically made also the point that during the Kosovo War, Handke, even during that time, he expressed his wish to be, quote unquote, a Serbian Orthodox monk fighting for Kosovo. So in 2006, Handke gave a eulogy even at the funeral of Slobodan Milosevic, the Serbian dictator, who was responsible for the genocides against Albanians and Bosnians in the 1990s. And Ferizaj also makes the comment that, according to him, awarding the most important literary prize to such a writer not only suggests a deeply rooted Euro-Atlantic indifference towards the fate of the Muslim majority European countries like Bosnia and Herzegovina and Kosovo, it also represents a fit occasion for the normalization of Islamophobic attacks against the right to exist for Kosovo, for instance, by European politicians. So I think the denial of the genocide against Bosnian Muslims has become simultaneously also with the proudness of white supremacists who murdered Muslims like the Christchurch terrorists, a symbol of anti-Muslim ideology, right? So we all know when we speak about anti-Semitism, anti-Semitism is always also connected to the denial of the Holocaust, right? And similarly, now we see in the circles of white supremacists that they very much deny the genocide that happened in Srebrenica and other places in Bosnia and Herzegovina. So it is not only the Nobel Prize winner Peter Handke, but also leading politicians who deny the genocide perpetrated against Bosnian Muslims. One part of this denial is also the strategy of belittlement, right? So just to give one example again from last year, during the Yahorina Economic Summit on July 9th in 2019, the Serbian Prime Minister, Ana Brnabić, referred to the Srebrenica genocide as a quote-unquote misunderstanding. Such rhetoric is, again, not rare among Serbia's highest officials. At the same time, and I think that's also something important that we have to keep in mind, there are certain European politicians who try to reframe the past and or the present of Muslims' realities in Europe to make today's Bosnia the problem. And this is what I would call the strategy of victim rehearsal. Again, this is something we very much know from anti-Semitism. And I think the most outstanding example of making Muslims in Bosnia the problem was in last year a remark by the French president, Emmanuel Macron, who said in an interview with The Economist, I quote him, "If you are concerned about this region, the first question is neither Macedonia nor Albania, it's Bosnia-Herzegovina." And he continues, "The time bomb that's ticking right next to Croatia and which faces the problem of returning jihadists is Bosnia-Herzegovina," unquote. So what is important here is that President Macron neglected to mention the white supremacist ideology that is not only represented by far-right groups, but very much by top politicians and political leaders in that region, rather than criticizing white supremacist ideology and people who deny the genocide or who belittle it, on behalf of those in power, he rather opted for criticizing the marginalized Bosnian Muslim community. And again, I think that this strategy of the victim rehearsal is a very problematic one, because if you look at the public discourse that we can see in Europe and how they are discussing the issue of Bosnia as part and parcel of Europe, again, it's very often this being a hotspot of terrorism, right? So Bosnia is structurally being marginalized within the European continent. So similar to the denial of the genocide in many European countries, we can observe the denial of the very existence of Islamophobia itself. And the reason why I want to point this out is not only because we are here based on the presentation of the European Islamophobia report, but also because the genocide against Srebrenica was also partially based on a rhetoric that was deeply rooted in an ideology that saw the Muslim stranger as the enemy within the society. Today, we have a number of countries in Europe. To give just two examples, Austria or Norway, where leading journalists of editorial boards shift the focus from Islamophobia as a problem to Islamophobia as a combat term, right? They argue that the term itself is used by Islamists to delegitimize any debate on Islam and Muslims. But what we see in reality is that people are getting killed because of this anti-Muslim ideology that is out there. A continuing effort by some forces is attempting to spread fear and reluctance to use the term Islamophobia in the public sphere or anti-Muslim racism, thus basically feeding the strategy of victim rehearsal on a different level. And we have to be aware of the many existing dots that connect these transnational anti-Muslim actors, right? When parts of the political establishment in the Republika Srpska continue their separatist policy, they are also supported by visits from abroad, especially members of far-right political parties that are also in some cases, like it was last year for the case of Austria, the Freedom Party, they were part of the government. So also on another level, this ideology travels, and that was mentioned already shortly before. The perpetrator of the Christchurch terrorist attack in New Zealand, he had names being inscribed in the weapon that he used to kill those people, right? Again, drawing very much on an idea of an eternal war of white European people against the Muslim invasion, which they imagined to be the biggest threat today in Europe. And I think all of these aspects are aspects that remind us how important those incidents can become and how much also this is something where people draw mobilization on in order to mobilize people in this eternal battle that they imagine to structure the relationship between Muslim minorities in Europe and the rest of the society. So at this point, I would like to thank you for listening, and I'm looking forward especially to the part of Ivan, and I'm very happy that he's with us, speaking especially from a perspective of Serbia itself, and how that also translates very much in the national context there. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Farid, for this presentation. And I would like to now give the floor to Ivan Ejub Kostic. He has authored the Serbia report in the Islamophobia report. So Ivan, I mean, you are following the issue from Serbia also, and of course the source of this denial coming from Serbia in the first place, but also it is very well connected to some other far-right circles, especially in Europe, but beyond. So what can you tell us about this? I mean, are there any also counter movements to this this denial in Serbia? I know that there was in the past, but what is the situation today?
Assalamu alaikum and good evening, everyone. First of all, I wanted to give my thanks to SETA for inviting me here, and to Enes and Farid also, as editors of Islamophobia report. I would like to, because you concentrated a lot on genocide denial, which is absolutely one of the most significant problems that we are facing today here in the Balkan region. But I would like to go a little bit, one step further regarding the genocide denial and everything, because what we are witnessing in the last, let's say, 8 years from the moment when Aleksandar Vučić won the president election, who is current president still, and who was during the 90s one of the most vicious proponents of the Serbian nationalistic ideology and ideas that led to the Srebrenica genocide and what everything happened in Bosnia. I would like to say that, you know, we are now witnessing something which Professor Dr. Haris Halilovic, who is originally from Srebrenica, but today he is a researcher at the University of Melbourne, and he was extensively writing about this. We are witnessing the 11th stage of genocide, because there is a very prominent and very important article by Gregory Stanton, who defined 10 stages of genocide. The last stage, the 10th stage of genocide, is genocide denial. But Professor Halilovic went further, and he defined that what is going on in Serbia and in the Balkan region today is the 11th stage of genocide, and he called this 11th stage of genocide as culture of triumphalism. What that means, you know, that means concretely that we now are facing not only that, you know, the genocide as such and the things that happened in the past are denied, but through historical revisionism, we are getting into the point where all these atrocities and mass murderers and genocides and ethnic cleansing, concentration camps, and what is also mentioned, which is extremely important, the destruction of cultural heritage, which can be defined as some kind of kulturocid. This is currently in Serbia and in Serbian, you know, media machinery that is working on that. You know, all of this is presented as a victory. So we now have this situation, very perverse situation, that, you know, war criminals, sentenced war criminals like Ratko Mladic, Radovan Karadzic, and all other people who were the leading, you know, people during the 90s, are now the war heroes, or let's say the Serbian heroes. And this is a widespread narrative that you can find here in Serbia. The all pro-regime medias and newspapers, outlets, and electronic media, and so on, are insisting on this narrative, you know. And of course, you know, you have this, we can say that there are two, let's say, pivotal players in this kind of, in building this kind of atmosphere in Serbia of this culture of triumphalism and genocide denial. That is the state from the moment, as I said already, from the 2012 when Aleksandar Vučić won the elections. And the second is the Serbian Orthodox Church. Serbian Orthodox Church is, of course, the people who are well, you know, known, who know these dynamics in the Balkans. They are very well versed in the negative role of the Serbian church, which is, you know, which lasts for decades. We can say for a century and something already, in depicting the Muslims and as archetypical other or archetypical enemy, the other with a capital O, yeah. And why it is important to emphasize the role of Serbian Orthodox Church is because the Serbian Orthodox Church is a very important, you know, pillar when we are talking about the Serbian national identity. The Pew Research, for example, from 2000, I think, 18 or 2019, you know, when they asked, could you be a Serb and not Orthodox? 80% of people said that it is not a possible thing. So in that regard, you know, Serbia Orthodox Church, as I said, is a very important player who is disseminating very negative stereotypes against the Muslims, and also regarding the what everything happened in the Bosnia and Herzegovina and Kosovo during the 90s. The second player, as I said, is a state who has a whole machinery of media machinery, which is absolutely in hands of strongman Vučić, And he gives the floor in this media to the most vicious proponents and ideologies who were during the 90s were the most, vocal proponents of this Serbian exclusivistic and aggressive ideology that led to the Srebrenica and what everything happened. So you have, for example, complete rehabilitation or reaffirmation of the Serbian intellectuals in academia, who are very, present in the academia, who are all over the place, at the televisions, newspapers, and so on, spreading the absolutely same narratives that they have done, during the 90s, like, this threat of some kind of Islamic state that will be formed in the Balkans, that depicting Muslims in Bosnia as some kind of, hotbed of Islamic fundamentalism, Kosovo and Bosnia, and Albanians, Kosovo Albanians and Albania. Of course, they are insisting about this this narrative of neo-Ottomanism, that Turkey is coming back to the Balkans with some kind of, again, colonial aspirations and this and that. So this is the narrative that goes, on and on and on, here in Serbia for years now. And it is absolutely, I could say, the dominant narrative that you have opportunity to see in the mainstream media and the most popular media. Also, the other, aspect beside the academia is, that state is indirectly or sometimes directly supporting the formation and activities of far-right movements, which is very odd that the state is doing this. So you have now, in the last 2 or 3 years, numerous, of right-wing groups that emerge in the last 2 or 3 years. I don't want to mention their names because I think that for the viewers doesn't mean a lot, but there are really dozens of these ultra right-wing groups that are today very, very active. And they are, of course, important because they are acting on this grassroots level, spreading this hatred on the ground. And also they are very active on the social media. And through social media, they are trying, because they are representing themselves as some kind of subcultural movements and this and that. And they are trying to reach out to the young population, in this plan of theirs, they are very successful. So they are reaching out to many youngsters there. And they are presenting the Ratko Mladic, Karadzic, and all of these people that we mentioned today as some kind of pop icons. They became some kind, you now have these very widespread, selling of the T-shirts, many, slogans they invented, and so on that are, related to the 90s and to the Karadzic and Mladic and so on. And that they are Serb heroes, lions, and so on. And so this is the second thing that the state is doing, So beside this academia and then these far-right movements. But then we have also a very important issue, which is related to the politics, or let's say the regional relationship with other countries. So someone I think mentioned already, I don't know who, that you have in the last 5, 6, 7 years, that the relationship between Serbia and the Kosovo authorities and Bosnia and Herzegovina worsened immensely. So, for example, just during the 2018 and 2019, you have, I don't know, numerous times that even the president himself, but also the Prime Minister Ana Brnabić, the Minister of Interior, the Minister of Defense, all of them, they threatened with some kind of a war of, let's say, arm offensive army offensive toward the Kosovo. And the other thing is that Farid mentioned this secessionist tendencies that we are facing and that are present in the Bosnia and Herzegovina. This is absolutely now obvious that they are investing a lot of money into the Republic of Srpska, and they are investing, or they are hoping, and Milorad Dodik, the president of Republika Srpska, he's even extremely open about this. You know, he's in Serbian media, is even drawing the maps and so on, how that the Republika Srpska and Serbia as one state. And he's absolutely open. He's saying all of these things very openly, that he doesn't recognize Sarajevo as his capital, that his capital is Belgrade, that he doesn't recognize Bosnia as his country, that his country is Serbia, and so on and so on and so on. So this secessionism is absolutely, I don't know, it is not anymore, it is not enough to say it's a dominant narrative, but it is really a long-term strategy, that because they are, in this moment, they are aware that they cannot achieve this. Even this they are saying very openly, but they are, saying that, in the future, distant or, maybe, near or distant future, they will achieve, and that they have just to be, patient, and that they undermine the statehood of Bosnia and Herzegovina, that this is their goal, and that in some moment Republika Srpska will gain its independence, and that they will join the Republic of Serbia, that it will become one state. And when we are talking about this, we don't hear, or we cannot witness enough, reactions from the international community. International community is absolutely absent. You cannot. I don't know, because the international community in this moment is absolutely fixated and absolutely occupied, focused that Serbia somehow solved this problem with the Kosovo. And because of this, they are not, they don't, care about anything else, what is going on in the region, and what Aleksandar Vučić is doing inside the country, and what are his plans. So, the international community has to be much more, proactive in, and aware that that they already once, first of all, because they have to be aware, because they have the lessons from the history, because they already, what was mentioned in the beginning of this web panel, is that that they already failed once during the 90s. We had this genocide, and we had all the mass atrocities, because the international community was absolutely incapable of stopping the Serbs, the Serbian aggression in Bosnia and Herzegovina. So they have to do something, and to be much more proactive in the Balkans, and to be aware what Aleksandar Vučić and Milorad Dodik and this whole political garniture, what they have in mind and what are their plans. And also regarding the genocide denial, and this, for me personally, and this cultural triumphalism and genocide denial is, as how I see it, this is just, the first step of reaffirmation of this Serbian nationalist project of Greater Serbia, and this unity of all Serbs that are living in all other countries, or the territories that this ideology sees as theirs, like, for example, Kosovo. So I think that this is, extremely important topic that the international community should tackle, and maybe I can now also say something about what Farid was saying, and that is about this connection, or let's say the inspiration that the right-wing groups worldwide, all around the world, are, that they are inspired from the Serbian nationalist ideologies. And this is absolutely true. This is the Christchurch massacre, and this Taran guy. He's not the only one. The Breivik, in his manifestos, memoirs, and so on, he was also writing about how he was inspired by Karadzic, and the whole. He has a whole pages and pages written about Republika Srpska and what that means. What that means meant to him when he was planning his attacks in Norway, and many other groups. And also what is, and this is, who is interested, you can download the European Islamophobia report, so you will find there in the report about Serbia that I wrote. There is during the 2019 there were a couple of investigative journalists who wrote very important articles about the connections of the far right groups in Serbia with the far right movements in Austria, in Germany, in France, in Poland, in Romania, Russia. Also, while I was also, because I was looking at their websites, their activities, and this is and Facebook channels and so on and so on. This is absolutely, they are all also not at all hiding this. They are openly collaborating and seeing each other, these groups, they are traveling to Romania, to Germany, and what is also important to mention, that even some like AfD, for example, they established, the very open political connections with the political parties in Serbia who are ultra right wing, and which are parliamentary parties like AfD is in Germany, and even AfD reach out to the Serbian Orthodox Church. Now, because maybe I don't know if we have some kind of time limit, but maybe I can stop here. I have also many other things to say, but I will finish it, with this aspect of the influence of Serbian nationalistic ideology to the far right movements worldwide. And then in the quick question answers, or let's say in the further discussion, we can go deeper if you want.
Thank you very much, Ivan Ejub Kostic, for this intervention. Our third speaker, unfortunately, Amil Khan from Remembering Srebrenica UK, he had a technical issue with his phone and he couldn't join us, unfortunately. So we had some questions from the audience, and the first question goes to Mr. Kostic. One of our viewers, he or she asks, do you think that refugees stuck and settled in West Balkan countries can inflame new Islamophobia? I used to hear some rumors like new Islam wave is threatening us. Another question is, we hear many news about the rise of far right in the political sphere, but another issue is that there is the fact that white supremacists are already trying to infiltrate the security apparatus in countries like the military. So my question is, can we feel safe in Europe, and could there be a second Srebrenica in Europe where far-right extremists already prepare for the day X? Another question, I think this question was to all the speakers, and another question is to Mr. Kostic. Do you think that there is a difference between experiences on Islamophobia by Muslims in the Western Europe and those by Muslims in the Balkans? Maybe we can start with Mr. Kostic, and then we can continue with Farid.
Yeah, I will leave it for Farid the second question that you mentioned, and I will try to answer this third question that you mentioned, the last one, the difference between Western Islamophobia and what is going on in the Balkans. I think it's a very, very important one. because the difference, between the Western countries and the Balkan countries, for example, you don't have a lot of, everyday incidents in Serbia, like physical attacks or attacks on the mosques and so on and so on, because the Balkan Muslims, they are living here for the centuries. They are the same like the Serbs or any other population in the Balkan. So they are the autochthonous group here. So regarding this, we don't have this, let's say, physical attacks or widespread physical attacks or attacks on the mosques or something like this, what we have in the West, or even these polemics about the hijab ban or halal slaughtering and so on and so on. In that sense, the Islamophobia is not manifested here. But what everyone has to, realize, or let's say keep in mind, that beside this, that we are not, experiencing this, that we are really experiencing the constant existential threat, a possible existential threat. In other words, we can say that, that in every literally second, or in every literal moment in the future, or is it near or distant future, as I said, we can say that when the Serbian nationalist ideology is in power and when it is in full swing, we can say that Muslims in the Balkans are waking up every single morning with the question: is the new genocide is possible, or when it will happen, or what should we do? So in that sense, there is this difference that, we are here always aware about this potential physical elimination. And I would just, in that regard, I would like to emphasize for your viewers that that all of our viewers, they have to have in mind that this is not the first genocide that occurred against the Muslims in the Balkans. So you had in the past, during the 40s, during the Second World War, you had a systematic ethnic cleansing and genocide in eastern Bosnia and Sanjak region. Then again, before the 40s and the Second World War, you had also the mass expulsion and atrocities again in the Kosovo, in the southern Serbia in the 30s, during the Balkan War. And in the 19th century, you have huge expulsion of an ethnic cleansing of Ottoman Muslims. There is a brilliant book by Justin McCarthy, American historian, who wrote the book, which is, by the way, a very neglected one. And he said that one of the biggest and most important ethnic cleansing in the history of Europe is the ethnic cleansing of Ottoman Muslims during the 19th century and the beginning of 20th century. So, so this is not something new. We are living with this constant, physical threat of physical elimination from these territories or from this region for century and something. So this is the most important, difference. And then Farid can now answer: is there a possibility that the genocide against Muslims occur in the Europe? Because he is definitely more competent to say something about this topic. And about this first question, I have to be honest, I didn't understood what the question was. That was something regarding the migrants, but I will now leave the floor to Farid, that he answered this question about the genocide in Europe. So then afterwards you can repeat me the question if you understand, or to clarify me the question.
Farid, I think you can also respond to the questions. That was one question. Maybe you can answer that.
Well, I mean, obviously nobody of us can look into the future, but it is, I mean, I myself, I'm residing in a country where you have nearly a quarter of the Muslim population is originally from the Balkans, first and foremost from Bosnia. So I know all those kinds of internal debates also within the Bosnian community, and how also they reflect upon what is going on in countries like Austria or others where they are currently residing, and how they see the developments, right? I mean, there is this theory about the different steps to the genocide, right? And it's very often that I encounter people, historians, or just common people who survived the war, who are reminding us and who are telling us about the severity of the situation we are in countries like Austria or others. This does not mean that that I would argue that yes, we are going through this or that, because I think it's just difficult to say. But I think at least what we can learn from all those genocide studies is that we should always be awake when things do start with words, right? Because words are much more than only spoken words. It's more than just thoughts that are translated into words, but it is also an imagination of how we envision our future to be, how we see reality, how we project our wishes and our fears onto the future, how we see it. So a lot of the things I think that we are also discussing in the European Islamophobia report, I think for many of us who are living in Europe, and once you realize that there is a certain atmosphere vis-a-vis Muslims, a certain way of treatment, how people speak about Islam and Muslim people here, and this kind of racism becomes very normal and is not anymore recognized even as a form of racism, but rather as a common way to talk about certain groups of people. I think this is the point where things become dangerous. And I think one of the things that we do with the European Islamophobia report is by presenting evidence from a whole year, we just remind ourselves and the larger audience that deals with this kind of report that there are really serious things going on here. So I think that also shows, because sometimes I myself even, this is how I see the work. Like when you look at the report and you read it from A to Z, and you realize what has been going on for a whole year and how intense certain discussions were, and the repercussions of different political discourses and how that has translated into discriminatory legislation. I think that's the point when you realize you have to look at what is going on here, and we have to see that we should not just accept the things that are happening to us, right? So I think yes, we have to be very much awake, very much critical, and we should especially engage and try to counteract those developments that we see with our eyes. So in that respect, I think this European Islamophobia report project is really important in that it brings to our eyes in an analytical way and in a very condensed way the things that are going on in our European societies. I think we can't hear you now. You have to mute.
Okay, yeah. Can you hear me? Okay. There is one last question. I think both of the authors can answer to that also. The European Union was coined in order to ensure peace in Europe, but then the genocide in Europe, in Bosnia, happened. This was maybe not in the European Union, but apparently on the European continent, on the borders of the European Union also. And unfortunately, since Srebrenica, we experience a rise of Islamophobia all around Europe, but also globally. Muslims and Muslim women are targeted by far-right extremists, beaten or even killed. What should the European Union and other state and non-state actors do in order to protect Muslims from further physical and terrorist attacks? maybe Ivan, you can maybe start, and then Farid can continue.
When I will again focus on the Balkan region, because this is also the as I said, because the question is about, again, this physical threat and so on. So I have to be honest, I don't, for example, me personally, I'm getting all the time, numerous and numerous threats, And only once in my life, I went to the police station and no one reacted. They just said, "Okay, you are doing what you're doing. You can expect this." So from the state, I cannot expect in this country any kind of protection. I'm absolutely aware of this. But if we are talking about this whole issue and what we are talking about until now, the genocide denial and this reaffirmation of this vicious Serbian nationalistic ideology and so on, I can just only say that, we here definitely we need some kind of help from the outside. Is this from the Muslim world? Is this from the international community, wider international community, from European Union, and the human rights organizations, and so on and so on? They have to be much more vocal. They have to be much more present. And definitely, I'm repeating, that, for example, in Serbia, also I would like also this to emphasize that there are two regions in Serbia which are absolutely underdeveloped and are under the constant, neglectance from the state. And this is the Sandžak region, which is absolutely predominantly Bosnian Muslim region. Then there is a Preševo Valley, where the majority of population are Albanian Muslims. Both of these regions are absolutely neglected. The Albanian Muslims in Serbia, they are not second-class citizens. They are citizens without any kind of rights. They're all absolutely in danger. When you speak with the people from Albania, this part of Serbia, they are frightened to come to Belgrade physically. They are feared for their lives. If someone hears that they are speaking in Albanian on the street or something like that. So you had even this kind of physical attacks on Albanian Muslims, because that was 2 years ago. This is also in a European Islamophobia report. I wrote about this incident. So also, regarding the Bosnia and Herzegovina and the problem, because we definitely have to pay some more attention today because of Srebrenica and everything, is that the Bosnia is in a huge danger. About this, you can read also in European Islamophobia report from my dear friend and great expert on genocide studies, Hikmet Karčić. He wrote a lot about this. Also, how the Republika Srpska and what are they doing there. So, I think that the only way is that we are pushing and trying to be more vocal as we can, and to try to make some influence on international actors who can in some way pressure the government in Serbia and to be much more present here in the Balkans, because the things can get very, very, very ugly.
Farid, maybe.
I think there is a lot to do on behalf of, let's turn our attention to the European institutions. First of all, we're still in a process of working towards more recognition of the problem of Islamophobia itself. I mean, obviously, yes, we see the terrorist attacks are increasing. Yes, we see that white supremacist groups are organizing around the continent, but still we are lacking influential implementations of policies based on the recognition of Islamophobia as a problem. So We always give this example of a resolution against anti-Semitism, a resolution against anti-Gypsyism that have both been implemented by the European Parliament. There is nothing comparable on behalf of issues regarding Islamophobia. Also, yes, there is somebody in charge. There is a position for a person being in charge to fight anti-Muslim hate crime. But again, this position is not financed in a way that they can really make a big change and a big difference, right? So there is a much more work to do on behalf of the European institutions. At the very same time, a lot of the institutions like the European Commission Against Racism and Intolerance, of the Council of Europe, the United Nations, and so on and so forth, they are very clear about the fact that Islamophobia is a growing problem in Europe. But what we need is the political leaders in Europe and in the European nation states to hear these voices and to walk the talk, not just only condemn incidents of anti-Muslim hate crime on the street, of Islamophobic ideology being disseminated by far-right groups, or even to suggest that they have to change a lot of the legislation that is discriminating against Muslims in many European countries. So there is really a big amount of work to do if we speak about political institutions. Yes, if you look into the European Islamophobia report, be it the European introduction on the European level, but also the respective nation state reports, you will see that we end every single report with a number of recommendations for civil society and politics. So there is a lot was what the different authors have collected in terms of recommendations that is coming also from civil society and from scholars who are doing this kind of work. And you can see there that there is really a number of ideas that we are here to share with people who are in positions of responsibilities. So this is just to give you an overview of maybe if you want to go further into detail, if you want to do some research, this is also where you can find something.
Thank you very much, Farid. We don't have more questions. And on that note, I would like to thank all of you, Farid Hafez and also Ivan Ejub Kostic, for your participation for this important web panel. Also, I would like to thank Abdullah Eren for his participation and for his keynote speech. Let's hope that this kind of crime will never happen again anywhere in the world, because it is a huge crime against humanity. And unfortunately, after the Second World War, we've seen that it's happening all around the world, be it in Rwanda, in Srebrenica, but also in Myanmar. Unfortunately, we cannot prevent. We could not prevent these atrocities against innocent civilians, and then the systematic killing of the other people. However, I think this has to be, stopped, and through this kind of events and the publication of our European Islamophobia report, we are trying to draw attention to this problem. However, the problem here today is, I think, the Islamophobia has become the leading force of genocide ideology, genocidal, beliefs. In the past, it was more anti-Semitism. However, today, Islamophobia has become the main ideology behind this. Of course, there are other ideologies in the world, racist ideologies. However, the problem is really getting worse, and we hope that it will get better for all the humanity. Thank you very much. Thank you to all, and I hope to see you again in another web panel. Thank you also to our viewers. Thank you.